Hi, welcome to another episode of the Jackpot cast where we jack each other off about whatever we want to talk about, I guess.
Hi,
The
see you there.
jackpot, the
The
jackpot
Jackpot.
The jackpot.
cast.
All right, 3, 2, 1. Welcome to the jackpot.
Jackpot.
Man.
Jim,
Awesome.
you missed it.
I no, I said it.
Oh, okay. As long as it's like as far as like close to a circle jerk as we
Jackpot
can get.
podcast. See?
Okay, that's the sound that we put at the beginning of every podcast, where you're just like jackpot podcast.
Yeah, it breaks your ears. I take it am I really loud right now?
No, it was just the
I like it.
enthusiasm that was so
Oh,
good.
okay. Oh, thank you. Yeah, so today's we have I guess I'm the host because I said so, and I'm Jim, and I have Aaron with me. Aaron, do you want to say hi?
Hi, I'm Aaron, and is it handed off to Kevin?
Hi, I'm Kevin, and today we might be talking about hands and things that get off.
Hey, sounds like my kind of podcast. So this week we're looking at an anime that I picked out called. It's a very long title. Usually you can like Full Metal Alchemist is FMA, and you can usually make an acronym of the name, but this one you can't. I think I titled this podcast. The anime is called "Is It Wrong to Pick Up Girls in a Dungeon?" That's the title. So it'd be IWTTTPUGIAD.
Sexy.
So yeah, you just say, "Is it wrong to pick up girls in the dungeon?" And I picked this because I thought it's a brilliant depiction of maybe the young man's masculine fantasy, like just pure, unadulterated fantasy for men. And so yeah, I forced everyone to watch an episode, and then we're going to talk about it today. See what we noticed, see what we enjoyed, not just what we didn't like, but we um, couldn't help but to enjoy. Yeah, maybe we can just to start off to give the viewer some idea of
Skinny, meek character. Main character is a man. He's a
yes.
boy, to be honest. He's got red eyes and gray hair. And all you see from him when you're introduced is this giant minotaur lazily tries to kill him in a dungeon. Okay? And this hot armored girl saves him. Then you start realizing you're in a video game, and this guy just fell in love with some girl for saving him and then being cold towards him. And
Right.
that's it.
So the premise of the show, it's an isekai, and so that means that it's essentially a video game world where our protagonist is either just exists in a video game world or they're sent to a video game world. Um, that ends up almost always being some kind of perfect reality for them. And Yeah, I mean that's the basic premise of the show, except there's some interesting um, details. Like I guess it's in general, this isekai is kind of based roughly around the idea of the Greek pantheon, or like some kind of not Hellenistic, but I guess it's pagan world where gods exist. They don't have their powers, but instead they're basically just a bunch of hot, busty girls that run
Oh, they
around.
literally don't have their powers.
They literally have no
They're
powers. They
just
just
normal people.
yes, and they recruit people, warriors usually or whatever, under their name, under their house name, and then those warriors go to this giant tower in the center of the city. I guess there's one city, and they fight for the god, and I guess they bring back XP. The first episode doesn't really go into that too much, but yeah, maybe before we jump into it, do you guys watch much anime?
No.
No.
I
Okay.
don't really. I mean, does Dragon Ball Z count as anime?
No, not anymore.
Not anymore. Not really.
Okay, yeah, that was basically the only real
Right.
kind of like Japanese cartoons I watched.
Oh wow. Okay. Well, yeah, then I'm definitely the weeb here because I
You
watch.
imagine. This is like Kevin's like, oh, I love anime. I love Dragon Ball Z. I love that stuff. I haven't got a second chance at yet. Let me.
Yeah, so in some ways, it's changed a lot since the early 2000s, 90s. In many ways, it hasn't. But I'm the weeb. I've watched a good amount of anime, not as nearly as much as other people, but in contrast to you guys, and I can tell you that this anime is very run of the mill in many ways. The majority of anime is tends to be like masculine fantasy. So with that in mind, I might add stuff as we go on about whether or not certain elements are common to like all animes
Yes,
or not.
please.
Um,
Is
yeah,
the
do you
guy
guys?
always meek? Is the main male character always meek and possibly 15?
Yeah, yeah. Let's. Yeah, it's a good thing to jump into. Yeah, not always. I mean, there's a varied. I really want to sit down. This part, once I graduate with an English degree, I'm thinking I'll just sit down and watch a bunch of anime, and then make a YouTube channel about analyzing the tropes amongst them. Because what's remarkable, and I really mean this, is I'm sure you guys watched this and thought it was fucking ridiculous for the
Oh
most
yeah.
part, like just utterly ridiculous.
Oh, like barely. I thought they didn't even write it, but you're like, no, this is regular.
This
It'll
is
work.
yeah, yeah.
Well,
Um,
you say it was ridiculous, and maybe there was some sense of that with me. Like, uh, there were certainly things that were really exaggerated, and things that were, um, how do I put it? Um, kind of like obvious analogies, maybe sort of too on the nose, I guess.
mm,
Like, having to work. Well, maybe I won't talk about that just yet, but the like over the topness and kind of the on the nose analogies make it seem more like a cartoon in that sense, and I guess that's kind of ridiculous. But I don't know if it's any more ridiculous than like other kinds of cartoons, but they're just kind of
Did you not
uh,
like when Jim was like, "Hey, it's an isekai. It's like he's in a video game world." I thought that meant in all cases the show starts off with bleep bloop. We're logging in. There's no logging out in this show. This is the only universe that exists, and it's
well,
yeah.
like,
sometimes there is. I do think it's sometimes it's like a loser guy logs into a video game and gets stuck there. That's a pretty common one.
Yeah, this seems
It-
like very D&D, like all of a sudden
yeah,
like
this is the world, right? There's no
yeah.
other outside. It's interesting that you don't think it's ridiculous, and that's actually kind of a good point, right? We are dealing with cartoons, plenty of cartoons, and certainly live action shows are fine with excess and caricatures. But I think what makes it seem ridiculous is how unabashed it is in a specific type of ridiculous. Tom and
Mhm.
Jerry is kind of a neutral. I wouldn't call Tom and Jerry a masculine fantasy, right?
Right.
It's ridiculous, but it doesn't have. Maybe we can go into this. I'm not sure which one it would be best to start with: depiction of men or depiction of women in it. Do you guys have a preference?
That's a tough one.
I'm
Because
leaning
either
toward
way, either
yeah.
either way, it's not a good look, right? It's like a catch 22.
It's pretty bad. Well, what would be the
Let's start with
most
men, just because it is
right?
a sort of a masculine fantasy, and the main character is a guy.
Right, right. So we have Bell, which Aaron, you talked about a little bit, and I think his name is Bell, and he's essentially kind of like he's kind of little boy-esque. That's how they position him. He's like the fool at the beginning of his journey. He's weak. He's sensitive, sort of. And let's see. I took some notes. He's blessed with good luck. Women around him, for no reason, fall for his charm. Even in the first episode, there are three women who are introduced.
there was no explanation to
They
why
just, yep,
they
nope.
all like him.
Well, what's interesting is like there's something about his charm which is either unpronounced or it's either something about his naivety, which is interesting.
Something
That
innate to him,
yes,
not on
but
the outside.
sometimes it's explicit. Like the first lady, if you remember, who talks to him after he goes to the dungeon or gets saved by his waifu. Um, she just thinks he's cute, and he's like a little boy, doesn't understand how the world is. But yet, even there, he has this weird charm over her. And he says, "I love her. I love you" to her as he leaves. But so he's blessed with good luck. He doesn't really have much of a personality other than the fact that he's a good boy. Again and again, it positions him as he's just a good boy. You know, he wants to help.
He's trying so hard.
Yes. And his main
Wow.
motivation in the whole narrative is basically he falls in love with this girl who saves him. And he wants to get stronger. This reminds me of what you were talking about last time, Kevin, where the masculine fantasy is kind of bounded up with this idea of protecting women. He wants to get strong enough to protect her, even though she's way stronger than him.
Literally, a character said that you have to get stronger because women only want men that can protect them. And he's
Yeah,
like,
that was his,
okay,
and that was
I'll
his
get that.
grandfather.
Oh,
So there's kind of a weird generational, talk about patriarchy kind of going down the line. Um, is there any, based on what I said right now, is there anything I missed about Bell
um,
that you guys think?
Well, you brought up his naivete earlier. I think that's, if we were to talk about
it's also oblivious.
Bell in this world, he's like at the beginning of the dungeon. It's basically like he just started the RPG. He's just
Right.
starting to level up. And um, one thing that seems kind of important to the story is the woman he falls in love with in the dungeon is from a different family. And it seems like every family has kind of like a goddess that
Mm-hmm.
is part of that family. And he has one of these goddesses at home.
Yeah.
And basically, the goddess is, it seems like the goddess is just like a live in girlfriend.
It seemed
Um,
like she was supposed to be in charge for a minute, and then it seemed
yeah.
like she's a simp for him.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Very, very like, this is maybe getting into the stereotypes about women, but there's that relationship Bell has with his goddess, which his, I guess, like, is the start of his family. They use the word family, and like the screen had the term family myth.
Yeah.
So it seems like the goddesses are kind of built around like these families that go in and take over dungeons and stuff, and they grow their family, all of that. But um, Bell is at the beginning of this process, and to contrast Bell with, there aren't a lot of other men in the episode. Like there's
Right.
Bell and a bunch of other women that
Yeah.
he encounters, and then there's one other dude
One.
that
Yeah.
we meet. Yeah, and this other dude is like kind of like a hyper masculinization
Yeah.
of some things in this dungeon world. Like for example, he basically bullies Bell, not realizing Bell is necessarily there in this one scene, but he basically is just talking about like how much of a loser Bell is,
Mm-hmm.
and how not only can he not fight this Minotaur in the opening scene, but he had to be saved by the goddess, and a goddess should not date someone who is weaker than her. And this other guy is in that goddess's crew. He's the only guy in the crew, if I remember correctly. And
Oh,
so,
he's like the example of what happens if you try to get stronger to get the girl.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And then he reinforces this idea that like this is a part of masculinity which I find interesting. Not only is the man supposed to be a protector of women, but he is supposed to protect women from other men.
Mm.
And
Interesting.
that I found to be like a really interesting. That was probably the most interesting scene to me, is when he was sort of bullying this other guy. That's the toxic masculinity that people talk about, where these norms around being men are enforced by other men on men.
Yeah, what I find insidious, and yeah, I think you're right. That's like you can't help but like think that that scene really stands out. Also because the writing's kind of terrible in the sense that for some reason the overly masculine guy really talks the dialogue is written in a way that's a little too specific, right? It's very clear. It's almost as if he knows Belle likes this girl, and he wants to bully him because he starts kind of randomly going off, like, "Hey, remember that loser? You
Yeah, like,
saved. He's not hot, is he? You wouldn't date him." Like weirdly, oddly specific
and then he starts
stuff. He's like, "You would
screaming
date
at her
me
like,
instead, the big
"Oh yeah?
strong
Well, then
man."
who would you date, huh?"
Yeah,
And you're like,
exactly.
"Oh, I don't think that's how you get a girl, by adding it up
well,
and being like, hey, I have a higher score than your boyfriend,
well,
so come over here
here's
and
what
have
I
a
find
hamburger."
kind of insidious, not insidious, but kind of silly. And I think, Kevin, I think you're right. The show is like intentionally positioning what a toxic male looks like. And Aaron, I like your point that, oh, this is what it looks like when the guy tries to get stronger for the girl. And maybe, but the main protagonist is also doing that. And so the difference between him and this other guy isn't exactly clear to me when it really comes down to it. They seem motivated by the same stuff. Um, and there's kind of a cheat here because, Kevin, when you said, oh, well, he's trying to protect women from other men. And maybe not that you said the main protagonist doesn't do that. I actually have watched the first season. It doesn't happen. But what happens there is the protagonist doesn't have to do that because there's no challenge. There's literally like almost no other men in the entire narrative, which you notice in the first episode, right? There's one other man. So there's kind of this part of this fantasy is that, I mean, if we looked at it very straightforward, is not only is this young, naive boy have some kind of charm about him, even though he's weak, he's very good hearted. But other men don't exist as challenges. They just don't, right? There's no
Oh yeah,
actual competition.
it's just
Uh,
work hard and you'll get the girl. Listen, this whole thing is such a thin analogy over Japanese culture. It kills me. Like,
oh,
if you're a thin, weak man who's just starting in the workforce, don't worry, work hard. Women will appreciate that, and they won't appreciate their boyfriend who's yelling at them at karaoke or whatever. And I'm like, oh, come on, man. Like, and
you've related with it. I know I did.
I
I mean, come
related
on.
with.
um,
I think
I,
there's something interesting too about the fact that his goddess, his simp goddess, does something like on his back, some shit on his back
Like
as
checking
like
his
a
stats.
yeah, checking his stats or something. It almost seemed like a spell or something like that, like how
Mhm.
she could improve his stats or something. And then she hides the fact that he got a new skill, and that
Mhm.
skill is that um, he's going to level up faster now that he's been changed by this other goddess who saved his
Oh, I
life.
was gonna say it's like a sexual tension XP bonus. The more
Exactly.
Literally,
sexual
Yeah.
tension
Yeah.
yeah,
there is.
yeah.
The more
The more,
interested he's
yeah,
in, more interest he has for this other goddess, the faster he levels up.
yeah.
Was
And
she
isn't
the
that,
goddess of the clan?
yeah, what of the clan there is?
I
But
thought she was just like hanging out.
no, she's the goddess. And I mean,
That
there's a
seems like
couple.
he should know 100% that what he's doing should make his goddess jealous, and he has no idea.
Well, that's a curious thing, and maybe we can touch on Hestia, which is his little wifey, poor girl in limbo who will never get his love, kind
Oh
of
my god,
girl.
so many guys watching this that relate to this are like, "Oh my god, it's right in front of you, dude. How can you keep missing
Right.
it? God, I would. Oh my
Well,
god,
what's the
Hestia.
fantasy there is like in the that there is a woman who will always be there that is constantly in limbo and like that will accept you no matter what, right? That already loves you at your weakest.
Oh, my mom.
Yeah, well, and that's what I was going to say. There's a weird like on the nose like, remember, this is a myth of a family. This is a family myth, Kevin, as you said,
I didn't think
and
about that.
they are technically the goddesses. Um, uh, like there's a well, let's see what Hestia is a yeah. So Hestia is the goddess of the hearth and home in
Oh,
Greek
I
religion.
wonder how.
but there is a strange. There's something slightly Oedipal about this situation, but it's kind of
It's
uh,
weird though. The girl he lives with, the goddess, is short, and then the other goddess is tall. Which in like Asian culture, you want to be tall and skinny, not
well,
short with big tits.
I I think it's part of a trope, but something to think about is if this was like more of a mommy figure, that would probably kind of come off a little too strong. So instead, shorten them, make them busty and stuff, make
Yeah,
them
but now
all
it's just
accepting.
like a little sister that
Yeah, precisely, right? So there's a lot of stuff going on.
literally. Oh my god,
Um,
they made it so blatant that like this girl is laying on him with her tits out, and he goes, "Oh my god, I gotta get out of here. Oh, it's embarrassing."
and it's strange that he's so naive to her love.
I think
Um,
he's naive to sexuality, because that's
right,
what it
right.
seems like.
Well, and yeah, yeah, right. He only knows pure love, right?
Not even. It's
And
like
it's
whatever idolizing people when you're a child. Literally, when I was watching this, I went, "This is how a child idolizes somebody." They go, "Oh my god, I saw that thing, and I'm so attracted to that." And you go, "What about it?" And they're like, "I don't know," and they run towards it.
right, right. Yeah, that's actually a good point. I thought of it like part of the fantasy is positioning the protagonist, the male, as like truly pure hearted. There's no lust. I only like women
Hmm.
for these non what material
Disgusting.
qualities. Even at the beginning, I remember the very beginning. It's like, oh hey, can you tell me about this girl that he falls in love with? I think her name's Eyes or something. Um, and then she's like, "Oh, what do you want to know about her?" And he's like, "Oh, I just want to know like what she like who she is." And then his criteria of who she is like, "What does she like to eat?" Right? And so there's a weird like, see, he's pure of heart. He wants to know her personality, which evidently is something as simple as, you know, what's her favorite color, essentially.
That's so weird, though. The girl at home is supposed to be like this proto mother analogy, but she's shorter. And then the tall, cold lady, who instead of the short, warm lady, is the girl he's trying to get. She
well,
showed like no, didn't she like look at him and go and like walk away? She didn't even say anything.
well, I think it's interesting that like maybe we can just skip to how women are depicted abroad. Like they're all very kind of two dimensional. The Eyes woman has even less personality than the main protagonist. Like she's
You're
explicitly
right. Yeah.
flat toned, no expression. She's like a blank slate, which I don't know what to make of. But
I think so. That's sort of related to um, this idea, at least that pops up in the West, that like women are sort of pure and
mm,
innocent. And I think that there might be something similar. I don't know if it's like an innocence thing. I mean, that's where the virgin fetish comes from in the West.
hmm
It's like that's the symbol of innocence. But in this anime, I'm not totally sure if it's the same thing, but I have a feeling it's maybe related just because that idea of having to protect the woman, um, like what are you protecting exactly? You're protecting this idea about the woman that is um, perhaps that they're innocent or naive or fragile, something like that. And so she sort of embodies that. She becomes this ideal, or like an exemplar of, you know, this woman who's compassionate, but also like isn't going to encourage or discourage too much either way. That's something I
mm,
sort of noticed about another woman in the story. You know, you were talking about Belle asking, you know, they're at the bank or whatever, asking like, "What is she like?" You know, and you mentioned the burritos, and this other woman was like, basically telling him the same thing other people told him, like, you just got to get strong. Also, you have your own family, so it's not really, you can't really date her, but you know, just get stronger. And then when he left, when Belle left, you know, he says, "I love you," and then she's like, "Oh, I shouldn't have encouraged him so much, or
Oh,
I
and
shouldn't have
left.
been so nice. Yeah, I
Yeah.
shouldn't have been so nice." And
interesting.
and I think that that might be a thing too, that like the woman should not be the woman goddess, whatever, in the story should not be so encouraging or extreme in any way. It like really needs to be like in the middle and supportive and kind of innocent, whatever. And I think that that's what this other goddess is sort of comes to embody, is like right in the middle. And Belle's goddess is kind of extreme in her emotions, it seems.
Oh yeah, yeah, and explicitly lustful, like explicitly.
Yeah.
It
Pining,
if you
lonely.
watched at the end past the credits, Belle comes back and he is nearly passed out, and she's like, she jokes, "Hey, you want to sleep together?" And he says yes because he's so tired he doesn't even know what she's saying. And then she freaks out. It's like, I didn't actually mean to have sex, sleep with each other. And it's very explicit that, I mean, throughout even the beginning and stuff, it's pretty clear she's meant to be like a sexualized.
They had to make her ugly so that we would understand, though. Okay, you needed to make her like the ugliest. You can't make her short and hotter than the other girl. It makes
Right,
more
exactly. Yeah,
confusing.
I thought
Yeah.
that was really funny. I was like, what's going on there? And I also thought, speaking of those, like that little explicit thing, there are hints throughout. Like she's always dropping the euphemism, like in every
Hmm.
conversation. The very first one I remember was when she was like, "You're not going to sleep at all tonight."
Yep.
Yeah. I'm gonna
Right.
keep it
Right when he
all
comes
night, baby.
back. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I
And
have a funny story about that from my personal life.
oh yeah.
Um, I was walking my dog. It's early in the morning, and there's this older guy. He's a Vietnam vet who lives in my complex, and he walks every morning. And he walks by, and my dog loves him, so she goes up to like say hi to him with the most like energy. And he goes, "Oh, how you doing?" I said, "Man, I'm tired." And then he said, "You bragging or complaining?"
Uh, I
And
finally got that. Yeah.
I didn't get it at first. I was like,
Oh,
"What are you
now I
talking
get
about?"
it.
Yeah, and I
I
was
thought
like,
you
"Oh
meant like,
yeah, I
yeah,
guess I'm complaining."
because I like worked
Yeah.
hard. Because there's a good and a bad for
Right.
everything, sir.
I remember you
But
telling that earlier, and I didn't understand it at all, but I didn't want to seem dumb, so I didn't say anything because other people got it. But now I get it in the context.
Yeah, but it's the same as what is her name?
Hestia.
Hestia. Hestia being like, "You're not gonna sleep at all tonight."
Right, right. And can we talk? And so this has to do with Hestia and how Belle's depicted. Um, the way in, and maybe with the pure virgin idea, with contrasting the two main female characters, is that Hestia is so loaded up with erotic energy that every movement that Belle makes that's quick, or basically anything he does, seems to, to put it crudely, like just make her wet. Like there's a scene in which and that also points me to like how the show actually visually depicts the women. So much money had to go into the jiggle effect that they gave some of these women. Like those were the smoothest parts of the animation by far. Uh, and So at one point, I can't remember what happens, but she's sitting on the couch, and first of all, the shot they give, she's leaning over in a seductive way for whatever reason. Just how she naturally holds herself is seductive. Um, and Belle gets excited about something, and he turns towards her, and she fucking erupts. Like he moves kind of quick, and then she erupts with like, "Oh my god, what is he going to do?" And so, um, part of the fantasy to me, it seems like that Belle is so loaded with sexual potential, right, or attractiveness that what women around him, women around you, right, is the fantasy, uh, are moved incredibly by any small movement you make, which I thought was interesting. And that's one of those absurd things that you're watching and you're like, okay, chill out.
it's so
Like,
confusing that this is a show for men, and in the show they tell him he has to get stronger, and yet every role is flipped. The women are all the powerful, strong ones. He's the
well,
little virgin. He's the one who's like valuable with having done nothing. Then usually it's a girl because their attractiveness. And I'm like, I don't under. Is this the perfect? It's not even a beta male. It's just like a limp male fantasy. Like you're just a little blank, the wet little napkin.
That's a
Like
good
you
point.
know,
Yeah, and I guess Kevin, you kind of answered this. That's a good point. I thought it was interesting that it is flipped. Like the man has to work harder to become as strong as the girl, as opposed to the man has to get stronger to earn the princess. Is what praise, right? She's explicitly a warrior too. So that's a bit of a challenge, but maybe it's as you said, Kevin, where it's just the idea that she's almost this Christianized idea of purity and virtue.
Yeah, I think, and there's something interesting about kind of the mythology of this world where um, the gods have left the higher realm and come to the lower realm. So all these women they're like legit goddesses, but they have come to live with humans and enjoy all of life in the lower realm. And by doing so, they agreed to certain rules. Um, One of those rules is they can't use their divine powers. And I wonder if there's something about this idea that not only are the women expected to have certain kinds of behavior, but women have all the power and they limit it
Hmm.
in this world. And I thought about that kind of in the scene where the hyper masculine guy is tied up by all the women and hung above the table, being like, "You're drunk, you're out of control," and they tie him up. And I
hmm,
wonder if that's kind of the
that's what the loser kid, looking at the guy who's around all the the asshole who's around all the girls, right? The loser
Mhm.
kid looks at him and goes, "I bet they all hate him the way I do. I bet they all want something better than." And it's like, no, don't give him the value.
Yeah, unfortunately, I
Yeah.
don't think. Yeah, it's yeah. Fortunately for loser kid, I think you're not going to be Belle. Um, but Kevin, I think you're right that I do like that point in a sense that women contain the value, and certainly it would seem that way to a teenage boy, right? Who this anime is probably oriented towards, although plenty of older men watch it too. Um,
Weak men of all ages.
Essentially, yeah, and they would pursue.
Ourselves included, by
Right.
the
Well,
way.
right. Yeah. Yeah. Dude, hey, I watched the whole anime. I watched the whole damn thing. So, there is something. I watched
Yeah.
something. Um, uh, but yeah, that it seems there's a weird confused message where getting the girl is the pinnacle of success in the show, like explicitly. Um, even climbing the tower, which is just a giant tower, a phallic shaped thing, right? That's how you deem your success. So you have to become this, symbolically speaking, get the top to the big penis in the middle of the tower, and then you can earn someone's love. Um,
Got to work your way to the tip. Oh, this is
uh,
just like in Greek, in Greece, where they taught the little boys. The dads taught the little boys how to have sex. You know about that?
Yeah.
no,
Yeah, yeah, Kevin knows.
It
what?
was a thing. It was a thing where
Oh, how are you
I
gonna
don't know
know
if
if
this
I
was
don't
like
show you now?
every relationship, but it was like commonly accepted that an older man would have a relationship with a younger man
Bring
until
it
that
home.
man like got married.
Oh wow. Well,
Otherwise,
that
how are you gonna
seems
know how to please a woman? How are you
right.
gonna know
Right.
what you like unless
Someone.
you suck my dick?
I was about to say
Huh?
someone pulled one over and it just spread like wildfire.
Oh, that works?
Well,
Man, I'm
also
gonna use that.
also I think it was sort of related to some of the um this is surprisingly on topic for this podcast, but it's related to some of the views some of the views about women in ancient Greece. Like, we don't have writings of everyone's opinion, but we do have writings from some of the philosophers of that time, the pre-Socratics, the Socratics, and Aristotle. And um, they all didn't have great things to say about women. Many of them just talked about how they're irrational, how they like basically are there to serve men in some way,
Let me
and
quote Plato: "Fuck
yeah,
bitches, get money."
yeah,
Where's all
exactly.
that? I want to see the misogynist Greek literature, bro.
Oh, it's crazy. Yeah, like Aristotle is like all into rationality and agency and virtue and stuff, and he basically just says that like women can't be rational; they're irrational
We read
creatures.
all
And,
this, we're like, wow, maybe he
yeah.
figured something out about logic at its core. Maybe he knew something secret that we didn't. Oh wait, he thought his
People
wife
use
was
that as
into
justification to this day to be
Right.
misogynist against women. They're like Aristotle said this about women, so and he's a great philosopher, therefore, you know.
Right. Right.
But
That,
that idea about women not being um, like the same as men in a relevant sense, um, I think is part of why that norm around men talking to men about sex popped up. So like
interesting.
that would be my I'm totally speculating there, but that would be my conjecture as to why that norm popped up.
I mean, there is something. I mean, kind of adjacent to that, there is something inherently about masculine fantasy that is like it's a non. Um, it's very interested in itself, right?
Mm-hmm.
Women don't exist in the masculine fantasy, right? Not really. I mean, these caricatures do. So, in some sense, it is men jerking off men, right? A man wrote this.
Right.
Um, um,
Oh, you're right. This is the hey. Wouldn't it be sweet if like the pizza girl was a girl first, and then like she came into my house and like wasn't scared or anything, and like like did stuff.
Was it scared or
yeah, which is a necessary part of it, right? Um, yeah, I okay. Well, how about this? How about what's some Kevin? You kind of mentioned some of the metaphysics involved in the story. Those were kind of interesting. Like, what are some positive things we can say about this?
oh, metaphysically or
Not
what?
even metaphysically. That's just one thing I noticed, which was sort of neat. Like the gods sealing off their power, so they must live earthly lives. So that
Mhm.
basically, fuck being a god, being a human is better, right? So it's a yay
Mhm.
saying towards life. That's
Mhm.
giving it a lot of credit, but that's technically what it says. So that's one
Mhm.
neat thing that I noticed. Um, is there anything that you thought was maybe fantastic, but also positive? Like not toxic inherently?
I do think that there's nothing wrong with the idea of like leveling up, so to speak. Um, I think that there's something admirable about the work, of bettering yourself or trying to conquer
But
this
literally,
dungeon.
before he does an action that betters himself, he goes, "I'll do it for you," and then he runs into her. It's like six of those in a row. He's like, "I must continue because of her."
And I do
Um,
think yeah, sorry, Kim.
well, I was going to say, and maybe you're about to mention this, Jim. I do hope that is a setup that's going to be overcome, where
Yeah, it
like
is. Yeah.
like really the skill is not doing it for other people or for these women, but it is doing it for its own sake, basically. And
I
then
believe
that
that,
that is the real masculinity rather than
yeah. That is essentially, and it raises a good question. That is essentially what happens in the show, sort of. The question is, though, like, can you honestly say that's what's going on when you have women sexualized like this and positioned as they are as objects, essentially for your own? Like, we're still well in the realm of fantasy here, and like you could beat off to any of these episodes, right? So is that really what the show's going after? It might say that, but then that's just the PR move.
yeah, do it for its own sake so that you get the actual goddess who will do the
No,
sex
no, no, no,
things.
no. Listen, in Japanese culture, we do everything on its own merit. And if you do good, you get a wife, and if you do bad, you get dishonored and kill yourself. Wait, what? Like, huh? You gotta do zero to hero in a hard world. Why? Because everybody else is good and then fucking That's it. Literally just seems like it's not even Japanese propaganda towards the people. It's like the people who wrote it don't have any other idea than use other anime ideas. And at one point, it was propaganda in the 1950s to make teen boys work hard for some figure, some future family, something vague.
Yeah, it does seem it. Yeah, it. I think a lot of media. I don't know. There does seem to be a developmental ploy, right? Oh well, you start off just being full with sexual desire, but eventually, um, you'll kind of sublimate that into a higher idea of what it means to be a man or have meaning in life, so on and so forth. Um, Sometimes Anna and I watched another anime that for the next episode, I'm hoping I can show you a shojo, which is a female fantasy, and I think we'll notice a lot of. I think that will bring up a lot of conversation because of how drastically different characters are depicted. And I won't ruin that, but
We're gonna see a guy in a tuxedo who has so much backstory,
don't
all the
ruin it.
stuff he's
But
done.
yes, it's
Just ruined it.
wild how
There's
female
gonna be a super
fantasy.
feminine man. There's gonna be a super feminine man with long blonde hair. I guarantee that, Bob.
Yeah, there's going to be all the tropes you imagine, but essentially you'll find that like all in all, women's fantasy is so much more tame than men's that it is kind of like whoa.
Like they
It's
don't
not.
need a big buff guy laying
No,
on them.
they have stuff like that, but it's still fantasy, right? It's still pretty close to the edge in some ways to like I wouldn't say porn, but it gestures towards it um, in a more subtle way than this anime does. Which I mean, look at what Hestia is wearing. She has like a string for a shirt, like it.
Yeah,
I mean,
a
it's just
party dress,
out.
I guess.
Everything's out. I don't
It's like
even
a
know what you would
broken
call
party
that.
dress. It's an
Yes,
exploded party dress, and I was
it's
like,
like
"Hey, girl, what's up? You look
yeah.
12." Hey, girl, you're supposed to be the mom, but you're the little sister. It's very confusing.
Like, whoa, I'm digging this. I don't know why.
I don't know why. Is it because I want to bang my mom or my sister? I can't tell.
What was I going to say? God damn it, Aaron. Oh, we're okay. So to name another trope. So there are different sorts of masculine fantasy that show up in anime, of course, and in some of the more extreme cases are isekais, and then there's another. I don't even know what to call it. It's essentially just a harem, but we've been watching this show called Classroom of the Elite, and its protagonist is the exact opposite of Belle, but I still think it fits into a masculine fantasy. He's detached. He is constantly bored. He's a fucking genius who pretends not to be a genius to just blend in.
Isn't that
Um,
convenient to relate to a genius who does nothing genius?
yeah, well, he does, but
But it's
he
in secret, and only he knows that
yes,
he's genius.
right. So that's kind of the he fails all the tests, but he fails them perfectly. He gets an exact 50, right?
And
So
that proves he has full control.
and then to fit, and this is kind of the big difference, all the women in the show fall in love with him naturally. And But the difference between Belle, sort of, is that Belle is aloof to everybody but one character, and this other sort of protagonist is aloof to all women completely. He's sociopathic, essentially. This show kind of goes into that, but that's another sort of masculine fantasy. It's basically it's the reverse. There's no potential. The protagonist starts overpowered, and he's completely
Mm.
uninvolved in everything. And this is also, I think, Sword Art Online is like this, and non fantastic or masculine fantasy esque like One Punch Man is like this, but there's no fan service or any weird
It's
masculine
just
stuff going
ultra
on.
power with no explanation. You're always good to go.
If Yeah, if anything, it's like it's a parody of all the overpowered narratives.
Mhm.
But Yeah, I mean, is there anything? I guess to go back to positives. Yeah,
That
I
was so
think
funny. Every time you said, "Is there a positive?" It's not, but we got none.
it is hard. I do think leveling up, finding a reason to get better, whatever you got to do, cool. Um,
I can't stop picturing a Japanese kid in a suit trying to like.
Well, and I think that's a good point. Like, I don't know how helpful these animes are, though.
Yeah,
I
like are
don't
they?
know.
They're not convincing little boys to like. I will be an accountant,
Yeah.
so that girl at school likes me. It's like, wait, what culture? What are you doing, guy who wrote this? Are you even making propaganda for anything? Like, I don't. Does anyone know?
He's just having fun, right? Um, but I don't know if it helps anyone. I don't know. I think, and Anna would probably agree. I think it does just verge into something to beat off to. I don't think anyone's walking away this as a changed man. You know what I mean? You could read really compelling, famous classic novels, and the moral of the story, if you took it to heart, you could change your life for the better. But we don't do that. Like that's just not our. We got to be
Right.
really
It
moved
has to
to.
be served to you. You're not gonna go do something after. When you're done watching the good movie, you're like, and that was so inspiring. You're
Yeah,
like,
wow,
inspiring for
wars.
what?
Yeah,
No, 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 that was the inspiring thing.
right. Yeah, it was an emotion, and now it's gone. So I think because that's our kind of baseline, this is just something to. I don't know. Jerk off to probably. Um, let's see. Anything else that you guys? Who's your favorite girl? Hmm? What did you
Oh,
like about
come
this?
on.
I'm
Are we gonna
Hestia.
like yeah, Hestia, dude. We cannot young dream analysis us based off of this. Like 100% it's Hestia. And there's
I
no
think it's
any
meant to
anyone else
be.
is wrong.
I think
Yeah,
I
but
think she's
it's like
designed to be the one we all sort of
Yeah,
gravitate towards,
oh
so
my
that like
god, I would just Hestia's so much better.
yeah,
God, why is
yeah,
everyone talking
yeah.
about that other girl?
And of
yeah.
course, in
This
your
is
actual life, if it's not your mom or your sister, it's probably someone you really just don't give a fuck about, right? That woman who's always accepting of you, right?
Yeah, but she's also like in your actual life, she's probably not fucking hot like that.
That's what I was kind of gesturing towards. Thank you for just saying it. Yeah,
So like, they're trying to paint this picture of like this like girl next door, best friend girl that's right under your nose that
yeah, yeah.
really
But
loves
it
you
honestly just
unconditionally.
seems like you have a busty little sister who wants to
Aaron.
sleep in your bed.
Okay.
It's very confusing,
You
considering
know,
I don't
speaking
have a
of
sister.
little sisters and relationships. So yeah, I'm going there. There's this someone on Twitter I saw the other day tweeted something that said, and it got a lot of likes. It got like thousands of likes. It said, "Incest isn't wrong. Y'all are just cowards." The insinuation that you're a coward.
And like this guy went and did something about it.
Yeah.
Like just before he posted this, he decided, dude, and
It was a
he's
girl who
now in
posted it.
prison.
Oh, it
Oh shit.
was.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
of course it's probably ironic, but it is
I
one
don't
of
know,
those
man.
weird.
She's a sex positive like sex worker on Twitch and stuff. So
I mean, it is. It is. I mean, there's famous ethical discussions about it, semi-famous, that are kind of like, well, technically, there's. It's just kind of a made-up rule, right?
Okay,
it's
let me
kind
be
of
clear
it's
here.
gross for
I
no reason.
discovered this. I discovered why this occurs. Okay, let me
Okay.
explain to you why this
You
occurs.
discovered,
I was at my grandpa's funeral. Okay,
and I saw my sister for the first time.
so my mom has like half brother, half sister that like they never had anything to do with their family for some reason. They're fucking lazy. And so that guy comes to the funeral, her little half brother guy, right? And oh my god, forgot what I was gonna. What's my
Incest. Come on, incest.
incest? So it turns out, so that guy's like 33 or 35. Okay, he's only a little older than me, her half brother. And it turns out he's dating his mom's friend. And I
Okay.
go, how did this occur? 56-year-old woman dating a 30-year-old man. And it occurred because his mom was hanging out with this friend at her house all the time. And it's just the proximity, it's just the ease of access. That's why everyone dates someone where they work or at school. And it's
Yeah.
never making sense. It's a literally proximal, as if it were a tribe thing. We're just okay with the person that's like next to us. And it's just I looked at his mom. I was literally talking to this guy's mom about this because she was telling us that he's lazily dating her friend. And he's, oh, I love her, I love her. And she's like, oh, I'm okay with that. My son's dating my friend. And I was like, oh, he's just lazy. And she's like, she wouldn't consider that. She just wouldn't consider it. Like all of her rationalizations about why this doesn't matter or matters or why it's okay and where the meaning is in all this, it already been set. So she couldn't handle this upset of me going, oh, he's the laziest person in the world. That's why he's banging your friend. She's in her head. She's like, no, it must be like true love or it has to happen or something.
It does, yeah. I mean, to me, it does. Look, love is love, but that borders on something vaguely Freudian.
I'm thinking like if you had a childhood that was so aberrant, right? And you didn't have any bonding experiences with hating your sister, like punching your brother in the arm is all I know about. You know what I mean? Like going
Mhm.
like lividly hating my brother as a child. Just like pure rage. Like why does he exist? Why am I not the only one? Like get rid of him, throw him in the garbage. You still got me. Like just
Well,
go
I also
away.
think like part of the laziness is part of the Freudian dynamic. Like it's about not wanting to go out into the world.
Oh, that's what causes it to be.
You want to just
Oh.
be like, oh, why go to with my mommy to her mommy's friend? I'm going to sleep with mommy's friend. I mean, that's, I yeah. I mean, I'm sure it happens.
You think
I
that's how
saw.
he told his mommy he was gonna do it? I'm gonna sleep with mommy's friend.
She
You're
makes me chicky
34.
nuggies.
Ugh.
I've seen one
Trust me.
relationship like that, and it did seem to me that the woman was much older than the man, the boy, the man, mid-20s probably, and there is a weird cultural like t- twinge you get or something. I'm like, oh, that's weird. That feels weird. Like there's something going on there. Um, hey man, but you know what? Get rid of that V card any way you can.
And it's not like, oh, you're like an accomplished strong 56. You could raid this dungeon so fast. You're
Uh,
probably a god of a family. No, it's not like that. It's like the anime started the same for this guy, and then somewhere down the line, instead of the hot little sister at home, he went for the barmaid with a wart on her nose, and then she like farts while she's talking, and you're like, what? That's disgusting. No wonder everyone makes fun of you. Well, I
Could
guess
have
it's
fucked your
still meant to
sister,
be.
loser. What are you
Yeah.
doing?
Even your sister was like, why is he over? Why isn't he with us?
um,
Speaking of like Freud, um, and
God, I wish I had a
Lacan and all
sister.
that.
yeah, yeah.
God, I wish, yeah, I wish I had a sister too. No, I have a sister, and
She doesn't
funnily
talk to
enough,
me.
I had a weird dream about her last night. So it's kind of
Oh,
Oh wow,
weird
she's
there you
not
go.
gonna listen to
timing.
this. Don't worry about it.
Um,
You're like,
but
it was
anyways,
weird because she poured breast milk into a glass and I drank it and said, thanks, mommy.
similar but with P. So
Oh,
It's so
yeah,
crazy.
yeah. Anyways, um, so I think Lacan has this view about masculinity, um, and sex differences that's kind of interesting. We talked about Lacan last time with God and the Big Other and all that, but with he says this he says a claim that at first blush we're going to be like, okay, is he just a sexist? He says men and women are not equal. Now, he's saying that in a very different sense than like, Trump would say that, for example. Um, or the way
Peterson.
that, yeah, or yeah, exactly. Or to contrast
Men
that,
and women.
the way that like someone would say men and women are equal as like a fact of misogyny and patriarchy, and they should be, what he's saying, Lacan is saying that there are these ideas we have about men and women, and those ideas are creating an inequality. And one of those ideas is that the masculine is dominant, and the masculine is defined as excluding the feminine.
Hmm.
And part of being masculine is showing that you are not like a woman. That's where we get these notions of like being emasculated. You lose your masculinity. when suddenly you are like a woman.
Right.
And I think that that idea ends up sort of creating these ideas around being a man, where other men enforce this idea of don't be too much like a woman with each other. The way that you work out, the clothes you wear, your accent, the way you speak, the kinds of things you enjoy, it ends up being kind of totalizing to your experience, that you avoid these things that are seen as feminine. And critically to, I think, a lot of men, part of um, being a man is to avoid talking about your feelings and emotions, and those need to be hidden. And if you feel them intensely, some of them you can't feel publicly, like
Mm-hmm.
sadness. That's a feminine emotion. You can't be sad. You can be angry. You can be an angry man all you want. And going back to the show, that hyper masculine guy sort of embodied that. Like, he's clearly very emotional
Right.
and
And insecure and
insecure, yeah. And he's being like aggressive, overly aggressive, bullying the other person. And I think that the running away that Belle does, that running away,
That made me laugh so hard.
yeah. I wonder if that is being like sort of hinted, implied that that's like maybe a feminine trait.
He had tears in his eyes, and he's
It is interesting. It
running
does
away.
feel, yeah. So Belle was kind of breaking the patriarchal norm there, or the idea of masculinity.
Yeah, I wonder about that. But at the same time, all the women in this show are like stupid strong. They don't
Yeah,
run away. So
yeah,
I don't know.
yeah. Definitely, it is fun. I mean, we can gauge our reactions, Aaron. I think when you laugh, you laughed a lot when you saw him do that. I think I did. I mean, I judged it too. I'm like, dude, fucking, just I don't know, just sit
What would
there.
a
What are you doing?
12-year-old do? Like, leave when
I
no
would,
one's looking and just cry the entire way home. It's their
you know,
fault. I have
okay.
no friends.
If I were there, I would. If that was me and I was his situation, I think I would have. I'd be like, okay, don't make a scene. Um, just sit there and
Do
then
you know what
wait
I actually thought?
and
The
then
guy,
leave.
so the toxic man looks at the god girl and goes, "If he asked you out, what would you say?" And I went, "Oh my God, you're about to get your answer,
Yeah.
idiot." If it's a yes, which a lot of things in your world seem to be for no reason, then you're good. Maybe she'll go, "Nah, he needs blonde hair." Well, then you're good. Instead, he just went, "Oh no, the
Oh,
things I'm anxious about.
did he
I'm
run
leaving."
out right before she could answer?
Yeah, she didn't even answer it.
Oh, okay.
I
Go
don't even think
figure.
she said anything. He's just
Right.
like, he just kept getting more and more angry. Like, what? I do everything around this house, and you're just
Well,
gonna sit
imagine,
here?
and also imagine, like from her point of view, like you don't even know this guy you saved. It's someone on the bus, and then this guy you kind of know. It's like, oh,
Literally,
you would date that guy on the bus? Come
yeah.
on. Would you date him? You're like, what, bro?
Guy who
What are you talking
asked
about?
asked me for a bus fare.
Yeah,
Who?
like what? Chill.
Huh?
He's a pussy. He's a pussy.
It's like, who
We're
are you? I'm not rating you men. You're all competing against each other, and no one can figure out why. And
um.
you hide all your feelings so much that you end up doing secret gay shit. It's very confusing.
I mean, I don't make it secret, but
I mean, you know. Did you watch that Andrew Callahan thing where he visits the chi guy? The guy with all the chi?
Andrew
Anyways.
Callahan, who's that?
Oh,
Oh,
the
the
guy who
Patreon
like
guy.
smacks his balls or whatever.
Yeah, it turns out that guy lives in my city. And so those forests that he's being gay in are my forests. And I could go find him.
You could.
This guy drinks his own pee and stuff.
Oh, okay. This just reminds me of I am. This is totally
Masculine.
non-related, and maybe we're just we've done with the show for the most part. I couldn't. with the whole, Joe Rogan, usually I'm kind of lukewarm. Like, whatever, Joe Rogan brings on idiots and brings on good people. Like, it's just a mixture. He just explicitly does whatever he wants to join, and he brings on whatever he wants to talk about. But the Atlantis stuff recently, I mean,
What
that
was
is just
Atlantis?
fucking like, dude, what are you
Okay, so
like?
listen,
Atlantis.
listen. Okay, let me give you the preface. There's two dudes, okay, and these two dudes are about the ancient civilizations. Now there are ancient civilizations that they're just finding in the Amazon, like under the dense forest stuff that predate like Egyptians maybe and stuff. And this all ties into like the pyramids being older than they think from water erosion, and an asteroid like hit the Earth and caused a bunch of turmoil. Anyways, Jim, take it away.
Yeah, these two dudes come on and start, and they speak well. They reference uh, scientific articles, but not with any depth. And it's just science fiction, and it pretends to be science. And they're just cute ideas. Um, they're like, oh yeah, this is obviously probably where Atlantis is, and Atlantis exists, and all this like anti-academic. It's like academics don't want to look at anything, With Lacan talks about I think it's I can't remember the dialectic. It's called like the master dialectic, but specifically the university dialectic, where it just reinforces its own opinions, like inherently, right? That's kind of how a university works. Um, Ideally, it has kind of unique stuff and novel stuff, and it changes its theories, but hegemony gonna hegemony, and so these guys are just talking about Atlantis and stuff, whatever. Ray guns, ancient technology, everything. Part of me is kind of like, Joe, why have these dudes on? You got to
They
have
went to
some
Reagan.
responsibility.
They
Like
can't have Dr. Reagan.
they do. They talk about how they have like there's a whole different idea of
Okay,
science.
I've watched every one of these guys' podcasts up until this one. You're telling me,
Yeah.
and they've been exceedingly reasonable and exceedingly scared to overstep because they've been called crackpots for so many years.
Yeah, they should, from my
They've been
interpretation.
called crackpots for so many years.
Good.
Like
They
the,
are.
the the basis for the Atlantis thing is just that there was an island on maps, and then there was a flood, and the island doesn't get drawn on maps anymore. And so,
Yeah.
like, okay,
Well, basically, one of the things they said was like, "Oh, well, in ancient times, maybe science could have gone in a whole different direction." And so, basically, based on like instead of
forget
like
paper and
mechanical
glass.
science, vibrations, literally
Yeah,
something to do
use
with
your
like
mind.
tuning forks and
No, they
shit.
fucking didn't.
But yeah, they did.
Yo, okay, so I have a thought. I have a thought
Okay.
about Atlantis, and this is where I think the Joe Rogan people they're like looking for Atlantis around Africa and the Mediterranean because they assume that no one could cross the Atlantic to get to South America and Central
Did you
America.
watch this podcast?
No.
I've watched parts of it, not the whole
I'm
thing.
like, why do you know
Oh,
so much about it,
so you
Kevin?
know it. Okay. Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But so anyways, everyone and I've watched a few of these other sort of talks about Atlantis and stuff, but everyone's kind of assuming no one had seafaring capability at that time period to get to South America. But there there are some like kind of indirect pieces of evidence that might seem more direct that Africans actually made it to South America way earlier than we anticipated. Like, here are the pieces of evidence. One, for example, if you look at the Olmec civilization, which is really, really old, the statues that
They
are
look black.
from yeah, they look like African people. And then if you um, look at the writing that, can't remember what civilization, but it's somewhere in Central America, the writing kind of resembles some writing from African languages. So the conjecture is maybe they were given some of these tools because none of the other, like in North America, there wasn't writing systems that were developed like that. And in South America, where there were other empires popping up, they also didn't have writing systems. Like the Incans didn't have a similar sort of symbolic writing system. They maybe had some kind of system with their blankets where they had stuff written, but that's lost to us. We don't really know. Um, but so like there's that other sort of piece of indirect evidence, and then this one's really interesting. They found in West Africa some corn, like corn crops,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and the the so it would make sense for people to be able to sail to South America and get stuck because of the ocean currents, but it's way harder to get back to Africa without some
Mm.
advanced sailing stuff. But the corn making it all the way to Africa is like how the hell did that happen that far that long ago? So, anyways, my
So
my
Atlantis.
theory my theory is Atlantis is actually just like was just South America or Central America, and there was trade
Yep.
going on, like ancient world trade, and we lost somehow we lost the ability to get there, probably because of like maybe this massive flood that happened in Africa, and there was a seafaring civilization there that got wiped out.
Well, I think that's all plausible. I think the only thing, I mean, the thing about Atlantis as an interest to people, it's not whether or not there was an ancient civilization that got wiped out by a flood. It's that there was an ancient civilization that was more advanced than ours, essentially, that got wiped out by a flood. It's
Look,
like a paradise fantasy.
they might have been
Yeah.
a little advanced for whatever time period, but
But tuning forks.
like laser guns based off of vibration, like you have to be angry to charge up the weapon. What?
Well, okay, so part of me is mad at Joe Rogan just being like, dude, what? I get you. It's like a cute idea, but this is
So
dumb.
dumb.
This is silly. And then, but what makes me more angry is if you read the comments, and of course, only the people who are
No,
into it are going to comment,
no.
and they are just, the things people say. I don't even know if they're bots or something, but they're like, someone said, "This is the most important guest you've ever had." Like, and also people are like, see, this is why history is so important. We can't ignore history. We can't just like pretend that these things didn't happen. But again, it's just like, what the fuck are you talking about? Who cares if there were ray guns 12,000 years ago? Do you know anything about your own history of America? I don't. And that's just
Yeah.
like, that's just going on today. So there's just some
Well,
weird, like,
I
yeah.
think speaking of history, I think that there's this Atlantis story kind of brings out some of the things that might be problematic about history. Like we assume if Atlantis was real, we assume that it was in this one part of the world because the technology couldn't have existed in Africa, right? And we
Yeah,
assume that they were probably white people, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's these like old world tropes around which civilizations were advanced or not based around kind of these like race or ethnic relationships or whatever. And that still plays out. And so these people who are like, oh, you can't ignore history, inadvertently perpetuate kind of those ideas, but they don't ask the question of like, well, hold on, did Africans actually have seafaring capabilities that could cross the ocean?
Like,
Was
Right.
that
was there
possible?
another way this could
Well,
happen?
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
and I wonder,
maybe before the flood that you think did it, maybe the sea levels were even lower and there was a land bridge, maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe there was a whole country connecting these two things.
well, so I have two ideas that come to my mind is with the kind of underlying fantasy that goes on that makes Atlantis so attractive is do you think it's more the racial fantasy that's implicit or the more explicit kind of what would you call it? It's kind of an Eden fantasy that somewhere in the past or make America great again just on the biggest
That
scale,
is
right?
so fucking funny.
that
Make
there's
America great again. Trump is like
Atlantis, yeah.
giant sound. The
Um,
raw city of
but that's
Atlantis.
it's looking backwards and it's kind of similar to like, man, I don't belong to this time period, right? It's something like that. It's kind of like in
It
the
is, yeah.
past, man, we solved everything. And it's kind of a way to
Mm.
escape everything now, something like that. Do you think it's more of the racial fantasy or
It's
this
also
like
like
return to the womb kind of fantasy?
all of your things here are the same thing of like, is it out there or is it in here? You know what I mean? Like, is it in this narrow place or is it in the exploration? Is it in the
Like the enjoyment of looking it up, or so what do you mean by exploration?
no, like, is it in what's to come or what's already been here, right? Like what's already been
Mhm.
done is already like
Right,
precise,
right.
it's settled, right? It's like maybe we're looking in the wrong place. Maybe the aliens aren't out there. Maybe they're under the ocean.
Yeah.
Maybe they're in mushrooms and talking to us.
They also on the podcast too. They talk about people mapping the DMT realm, and I don't know. It's
Okay, so
wild.
that's clearly, it seems clearly related. You know, going back to the question of, is it like an Eden fantasy or is it sort of these racial biases? I think if you ask these people and you really talk to them psychologically, it's really going to be more about this Eden fantasy about
Yeah,
losing technology. When I talk
Mm.
about the like that bias around the race or whatever, I think that's totally accidental. Like it
yeah,
was
yeah.
probably racially motivated like 300, 400 years ago when historians were talking about this stuff. But, you know, as we have like gotten rid of those racist biases, some of those assumptions are still there, but they're not justified by the same kind of racism. But it ends up having a similar effect, anyways.
Right, right.
You see here on this stone tablet, we see this man has tits and a penis. They invented trans before
Right.
we did.
I now because I watched some of those clips, YouTube like, oh, you like Atlantis? Here, and
Yeah.
so
Yes,
I
you
got
I'll
do.
this,
go.
I got this video last night, and I have to go soon, so maybe this will be the one of the last
Same.
things I say. But so basically it's like ancient song of Atlantis is sung by whatever. And so I'm like, okay, fuck me. I'll click on this. Like, what is this song going to sound like? And it's
Yeah.
this guy, I don't know his name, Matthias or whatever. And he's one of these dudes who's like, oh yeah, no, I'm reborn. I'm a reborn dude. I remember my
Oh
past
my
lives.
god.
I was, no, I wasn't born like statistically, what, probably in Asia or something like that. That's probably where my past life was. No, it was in Atlantis, and I know everything about Atlantis. I know their language. I can write it. I can read it. It's like the dude's just making stuff up, and like, sure, he might believe it, but it's just tongues at this point. It's literally just he's just making shit up on the spot. And they even say in the interview before he sings his song, which was he had a nice singing voice, but
You see the
uh,
interview?
I could probably find it, but it's like he's like, yeah, so the written language and everything, and he's like, yeah, and he's like, man, that must be nice, and he's like, yeah, I like to keep it to myself because the moment I teach it to other people, then they're going, then it won't be my special thing, and it's like, what the fuck are you like? Could you be more obvious that you're making shit up? Like, oh, I can't teach you it
That's
because
some Mormon Joseph Smith shit.
it
Like
is, and
you
it's just
hear
new
about it from
age.
South Park, but it's true how dumb it is. It's
Uh,
literally just in New Age.
And this guy, the interviewer, was probably in his 30s, and the other guy was probably in his late 20s or something. So it's just like, man, it's just baffling. Anyway, he sings the song, and it's just fucking gibberish, but it sounds nice. It sounds good enough. And of course, all the comments. What I love about the comments, especially on YouTube, is because this is such a broadly open thing that anyone could fucking jump on just because they want to. It's just a fantasy. You have other people who are like, no, I was reborn and he's wrong about this, or like, oh,
Oh,
his
that's so
music, I
funny.
feel like I can speak the language too. And
Ah.
it's just a bunch of kids basically, playing spiritual make believe. And yeah, I don't know. It made me, I'm like, oh, wow. There's a whole, because usually on the internet, you run into like kind of that destructive redneck stupidity.
You found a subculture that's not destructive.
I mean, I knew this existed, and it is thankfully sort of innocent. Like they're just like, they'll probably grow out of it in a couple of years.
I'm gonna make money by getting all these guys to give me their Atlantis
Someone
stories. All the dollars they have saved up for ancient civilization
someone
stuff.
did say like, oh, I meditated with Matthias on a retreat, or when I visited Hawaii, wherever this dude lives, and he was such a good guide. And I'm like, oh god, in Atlantis, a
We
student
should do a.
usually prostrates himself for his master.
Oh god. We should do an episode on meditation.
Oh god, and all the types. Yeah,
Yeah,
I'd
and
be down.
also like speaking of destructive ideas and cultures and stuff, I think we could have lots to say about the destructive nature of meditation teachers and gurus and all of that
Oh
jazz.
my
Oh
god, I
yeah,
didn't
yeah.
think of that. I blocked it
And
all out.
even types that try to get around it, like Sam Harris,
Yeah.
for example. Like, he
Oh yeah,
tries his
Yeah.
best to avoid it, but it's like, dude, you can't. I think he does an okay job, but also like you can't you can't release an app. You can't talk about this. Unfortunately, I think it's inherent that if you're going to give spiritual practices, you're going to become, in any form, any connotation to that, you're going to become something like a guru to someone. You
Yeah.
can't escape that power dynamic. Now, you
yeah.
don't have to abuse it, but
There's this really awesome philosopher named Evan Thompson, who actually I think lives in your neck of the woods, Aaron, who wrote this. I think it's a book called "Why I Am Not a Buddhist."
Hmm.
yeah.
He's a Western philosopher. He studied a lot of Buddhism, but basically, he questions this idea that Buddhism is an exception amongst all of the religions, and he talks about the problems of some of the ideas that come through it and why he is not a Buddhist in that sense, especially a Western Buddhist. At the same time, he does all of these things that like Buddhists allegedly do, and
Mm-hmm.
people from the outside might call him a Buddhist for that reason. Like he lives like one in a lot of ways. But it's a really, he's got a really interesting take on how people like Sam Harris perpetuate this like Buddhist exceptionalism. Like this is this is a practice. It's just a psychological. It's like working out for your mind, and it's preparing you for the worst day of your life. That kind of stuff. But you know, that's not exactly what's happening because you're telling them when you meditate, you're going to have these effects.
Mm-hmm.
You're like priming someone to get there. Anyways, so I agree with you that he's going to end up being this guru, and also
I
he has this like moral like whole
yeah
system that goes
Oh,
with
if he
it.
could just drop the moral thing, he might be okay.
Well, the problem
He's
is
so
you do
good.
need to. I actually have his app, so I know what his things are like,
Yeah.
and he does a lot of interesting stuff. He does stuff that I really agree with. His specifics, he's pretty hard, from a Zen perspective. He's very combative against people like Joseph Goldstein, who I think are actually really good Buddhist teachers or whatever.
Yeah,
And where he doesn't believe that there's any attainment per se. He doesn't believe that consciousness has ever actually changed in a meaningful way. He does a specific. It's something like, I can't remember the name, but basically, the sect that he really had his big awakening was where it didn't emphasize this long journey. It says you're fine how you are. Essentially, you're already good. Like, just recognize that, you know, this is probably where
why
he goes too
meditate?
far.
Why
Uh,
meditate,
well,
Sam?
well, yeah, and
It's the same
he
problem.
actually, so he actually ran into people who essentially taught that. He's had like kind of a, I didn't know this until I got his app and I heard his conversations with people. He's actually done the whole fucking thing. Like, since before I only discovered him through, popular YouTube culture and Jordan Peterson stuff. But like since his 20s, he's been going to India and he's gone under multiple gurus and stuff. And some of those
Yeah.
gurus, one guy in particular was pretty solid. He just said, there's nothing. There's nothing to do. I don't know why you're meditating. Like, everyone says I'm a guru, but I'm just saying, like, you're fine
Oh,
as
I
you are.
wonder if that guy's like the guy that got him like his uke,
He
you
said it
know?
was a huge. He said it was a huge thing. But then he found the specific Tibetan thing that emphasized that.
Oh yeah, what was that thing called?
I can't remember. It's
Did you know?
Zongshan, I think,
Oh right,
something
right,
like
right.
that.
Dog Chen, that's what I remember.
Dongchan, yeah, yeah,
Dog's Chen.
doggy boy. Yeah, so I think that would be an interesting conversation because I think Sam Harris, in some ways, I guess I was saying he needs the morality part because it's not clear what you do with some of the premises and implications of his
Yeah.
no self stuff. Like, it's not clear at all where morality stands after that. So,
Yeah.
um,
Well, maybe what we do as an experiment is we like try the app for a month.
oh, I've done it.
Okay, so you've done it. Maybe I'll do it for a month.
It's
Well,
pretty dope. I'm down.
I it's also not. It's less of a it's a Sam Harris thing, but it has a ton of different perspectives and practices. So he just has like he has a whole thing from Goldstein, who's just like I can't remember not Nibai. What was it? He's a specific type of Buddhist who focuses a lot on the body and stuff like that. And he's got all his lectures and stuff. Goldstein dude's pretty solid. Kind of a boring white dude, but good stuff. And tons of other practices. He has dialogues with people. There's a whole Stoicism section. He has a PhD on Stoicism.
You can do that? Defending your thesis, you're just like, nah, doesn't bother me. Here's my criticism. Nah.
Yeah. But we could do that. I'd be fine. I already done it. I still do.
Vending machine.
I do when I walk in the morning. I do a mindfulness walk, 15 minutes. When I go home, I do meditation. When I get back,
Yeah, shit. Putting Sam Harris onto fucking all three of us for a month doesn't sound right. You guys both have fucking shit you do.
I like him in some ways. I think in ways that, it's funny, especially when you have Jordan Peterson and him in the same room. It's like, wow, Jordan, you're really good in these ways. And Sam, you're really good in these ways. But you're both like amazingly stupid in these very, like,
it's pretty impressive.
Pretty obvious ways.
Sam, unless Sam talks to someone who has a signed authority on an issue, he will not offer to change his opinions because he doesn't believe the other person understands what he's saying unless they're an expert.
Yep.
And then they don't even understand what he's saying because he's doing something advanced.
Well, and also I think with Sam specifically, he's really doubled down, say, on some of his positions in morality because it's part of his app. He's been selling it. I think there's a real incentive there to just stick to your guns.
And he's been doing it 10 years. He's got a podcast that's been going 10 years. I've heard he's got weird shit about spending money and his wife and he's weirdly cheap.
Oh, I don't know.
Crazy weird cheap.
Yeah, we should do it. We should do a deep dive on Sam.
But for next week, are we okay with sticking to shoujo and then maybe sing?
Yeah,
okay, cool. And I'll send you guys the link to it, and watch it whenever. But I do have to go. I've been pushing it. I love you guys. No cuts or anything. So without video seems to help.
Yeah, this was A+.
Perfect.
Yeah. Now you have to stick around for a moment.
Okay. Of course.
Okay, bye everyone, whoever's listening.
Bye. Thanks for listening to the JAK podcast, the JAK Pod podcast, the JAK Pod
Jack Pod
podcast, cast.
Cast.